Good morning, everybody. So, yes, we are really excited. There's been a very big team working on Patient Connection 2.0 in 2025. And so we're going to dive right in. I'm going to start with an overview. We're going to talk a little bit about our certified features at a high level, and then we're going to dig into the meat of what's different regarding the login itself. I also really want to make sure that everyone has some takeaways, whether you're already live on Patient Connection or looking forward to it. And again, our team has been working on this for quite some time, and we're really excited to bring it to you today. So let's start with an overview. So, Patient Connection. Patient Connection is our browser based patient portal, essentially. It can be used as a device for patients to view their medical records, but also to schedule. They can request appointments, they can schedule directly, and it's live at many sites doing all of the above or just some of these features. So, it's very versatile. It can be configured for your needs. So, some of the medical records that we talk about here may not be relevant to your specialty and they can be hidden from that patient. But at this point, it's also very suitable for any specialty. Um, Patient Connection is our official replacement for the patient portal. So it was a certified back in February. It's also the replacement for our legacy web scheduler product. So those of you currently using it or previously used it, we are transitioning everybody to Patient Connection for both any portal features as well as our web scheduler or self-scheduling. All right, so the certification process. In a nutshell, what's different? We have several new features to meet the certification requirements. As part of that, there's also a new, more secure login process that really allows a non patient to access patient records. That was really the meat of this from a technology perspective and what's led us to many of these changes. So, federal interoperability. I'm not going to take anything away from our regulatory guru, Betty, but this interoperability between providers has been a priority of multiple presidential administrations and CMS for many years. There's a lot of rulemaking that's related to interoperability and also putting the patient and empowering the patient to really manage their own health record. That was clear under the first Trump administration and Seema Verma, and it's really continued um, in a lot of different ways. It also is relevant to our FHIR API, which is the standards-based tool that allows the data exchange between your EHR risk, MedInformatics, and our cloud applications. So these standards are similar to HL7 for interface, but it is its own entity. And these FHIR standards are the backbone of all of our apps, including Patient Connection. So what are these certified features? Here's the fun parts. The first one is related to two-way messaging. This is a traditional mail-based tool for patients to compose messages to their providers. Providers can also initiate conversations with the patient or provide documents. And it's very traditional, right? If you are currently using the MedInformatics messaging module, this is how it's set up, right? So the MedInformatics experience is the same for your end users, but the patient's experience is different. We made an improvement so the way that you set up the mail recipients, so that's the users, MedInformatics users, who can receive messages and manage them from the patient, as well as the way that you set up mail groups is new and different and a pretty big improvement. The patient can select one or more users, and then you can also customize the groups that you want the patient to be able to message. So in the past, it really went to a single individual, and now you can send it to multiple individuals and they each get that message. So big improvement there. And we will see I think it'll really improve the process. Otherwise, the functionality as far as sending attachments and receiving and replying to and then initiating mail with the patient is otherwise pretty similar to how it is and kind of as expected in really every single patient portal out there. The second big feature is also an existing one that the patient portal has, and it's the ability for the patient to share their own record. We call this the patient summary, and it's really the collection of their demographic information, but also things like their problem list, medications, et cetera, et cetera. and it's designed to be human readable, is what we call it, right? So the patient themselves can view the record and understand it. It also is tied to an electronic format that allows sharing of that record securely via email. So it allows the patient to share their record with other providers, as well as other members of their care team, should they so choose. But for the most part, of course, the electronic format, it makes a little bit more sense between provider to provider, but that is sent via regular email or direct mail. And again, coming back to empowering the patient, the regular mail, so to speak, is part of allowing, kind of reducing the barriers between for patients, so that it's easier for them to share their record between providers as they move around, either geographically or just to different providers in the area. Last but not least, this final feature is new to Patient Connection. It was not something that was in the portal previously, and this allows the patient to directly grant access to other users. So we'll get more into that later. But first, here's a look at what the two-way messaging looks like. So Patient Connection's been around for several years, and previously the messages were announcements. They were read-only announcements that went to all patients equally. So the first announcement will still display on the home screen, but if you have messaging, the two-way messaging enabled, the patient will also, when they go to the messages screen, they'll see these three different tabs. So they'll see the inbox, sent, and announcements. Announcements are the same. They're configured the same way. They operate the same way. Again, they're just global announcements. When the two-way messaging is enabled, though, the patient will see an indicator on the left sidebar when they have a new message. New messages are also in bold, and you'll see that the replies are set up beneath the main message, right? So again, it's a very email-oriented experience. If you don't enable the two-way messaging at all, you'll still see the announcements, but it'll be in this format where so it's really going to look the same. You won't notice it really as much. It's really only when you enable the messaging that you get this new experience. And on the right, you can see just what the composed message looks like. So again, it's pretty straightforward. The patient can decide, can select one or more recipients. And again, those recipients are either individual users or groups. They can select the subject, add an attachment if they'd like, and otherwise send a message to their provider, and likewise reply back or have a conversation. Everything is time-stamped, so a lot of that familiar functionality, if you've been using this in the portal, exists in Patient Connection now. So we're excited about this one. But the user login is really where the crux of the changes happen. So I want to make sure to go through this and hopefully ensure, really just wanting to make sure that people understand it, and make sure that you have what you need in order to handle really this update that's going to be going out soon. So what is different with the login? Every user is going to be registered with a FHIR account. Now, this registration process is not new to our cloud applications. It's been the way that our mobile app has worked from the beginning. So the first time they log in, there's a few extra steps, but then after that, the patient is able to, or the user, I should say, is able to select the passwordless as their login preference, and that really is the default. They can also choose to enter their password. So every user ends up with a password, whereas today in Patient Connection, many of you are focusing on the passwordless only login, which again is still available after they've done that initial first-time registration. The other big component is that authorized users can then select which patient record to view. So if they're authorized to view themselves and a family member, they'll get that selection after logging in. And then last but not least, we also improved the workflow where brand new patients, meaning they don't yet exist in MedInformatics, are allowed to register and access the app. So if you have in your service area, if you want to allow patients to request appointments or maybe schedule as a brand new patient, this workflow is optional, but it works a lot. It'll work better in our new 2.0 version. So let me go ahead and play our video so we can see what this looks like. So the first one is that everyone starts on the same login screen. Currently, the login, we essentially manage 2 logins per customer, where they can choose to do the traditional login or the passwordless. Everyone is going to start on the same screen, and start with the MFA. So we have SMS right now. I wanted to show what it looked like when you put in the wrong code so that you can just kind of see what the error messages look like. Now, this is a first-time user. They have not yet used Patient Connection before. They are, and in this case, I'm going to show with our new patient feature enabled. So Sally Smith has never been to this practice before. So she's going to see this register button because she's not only a first-time user of Patient Connection, she's also new to the practice. So at that point, she has a choice. She can either say, yes, I'm returning, and maybe modify her name, something that didn't match, or say that she is a brand new patient. She knows she's never been there. And therefore, at this point, I'm not only registering her for her FHIR account, but she's also creating an account in MedInformatics itself. So again, this is an optional feature, but it really is great because it allows your patients, brand new patients, to access the portal. Now, of course, there's not much they can do in there until they come in to see you, but they can still request an appointment. And if you allow scheduling, they'll be able to schedule. So the login process, which we'll go over several other times as well, is again is different, right? Everyone is starting from the same screen, and at that point, we are guiding them through the process, whether they are the first-time user or a returning user. We'll see the demonstration later where they're a returning user and what the passwordless only or the password process looks like. All right, so I'm going to pause there. I wanted to talk a little about MI Mobile. So just for context, our mobile app has been around longer than Patient Connection. It was released first. It's been live longer. And so anyone who has our mobile app is well aware that the first time you download and try to log into the app, you need to register. So there was this, link, but really direction on the login screen that says, don't have an account, create one. When this first went live, our early adopters certainly fielded a lot of phone calls from patients about this step, right? The patients are not reliable for knowing whether or not they've logged into this app before or not, right? So they could have accessed your previous portal. B, they get confused about which doctor they're even seeing because patients tend to have portals at every provider that they're seeing, right? So especially in radiology, this was a point of confusion and really, I would say, the most common phone call that offices were fielding from their patients. So several years ago, we introduced a feature where the first time the app is downloaded and then launched, there's a big finger or an arrow pointing to, hey, don't have an account, create one, really drawing attention to it. That only appears the first time they've downloaded it. And it really made a big difference. So those phone calls for these registration, you know, trying to guide the patient to register for the first time really dropped off when we introduced this. When we went with Patient Connection, though, we weren't able to, we didn't know that it was their first time visiting, right? It's not a mobile app that you're downloading. It wasn't as obvious. And so that's where most users, most of our customers have adopted the passwordless as the default login because of this reason. It was always really confusing to direct the patient to register. So I wanted to point that out just because anyone who's been using the mobile app is really aware of that. And that FHIR account that happens when you do that registration process is the same. So we're not really introducing a new concept with the FHIR login. It's just that patient connection, in order to have an authorized user, we now have to have a different login process. As we go through this, you'll see that there are several steps to the login. And one thing that is also new to 2.0 is a resource. So several customers asked, how can I want to add my phone number on here. I want to make it easy for the patient to reach out to us if they have questions or issues logging in. For the most part, the issue logging in is not technical. It's that the patient's information is different, right? We're still matching to their demographics. And so if they're, whether they go by a different first name, maybe their last name is hyphenated. Of course, there's so many different reasons why the information they're inputting might be different than the name that you have in the system, or they even have a new phone number. So what we're introducing in 2.0 is a link. You'll see it on each of the login screens, because again, there's a couple different steps. And this is customized for your content. So initially, it's just going to launch to your home page, your home web page. That typically is going to have information with your phone number, hours, and locations. If you want us to direct the patient to a specific page, either now or in the future, you just submit a case and put that in there, and we'll update that link. So this is a nice way to introduce. If those of you that have good marketing teams will probably move pretty quickly, but any resources that you want to direct to the patient, you're able to personalize that and customize it for your practice. Okay, we're going to talk more about the login, really to understand our authorized user. So again, our authorized user is not the patient logging in, right? This is a family member, parent, guardian, um, authorized to access the patient's record. So we have two different sides of this one. One of them is the ability for the patient themselves to both grant and revoke access. So the patient can go to the account screen, they can give access to another user. They can then view who they've granted access to and remove that access. Further, they're also required, but they can view the activity log so they can see their activity in the app as well as any authorized users. So, again, this is part of the regulatory requirements, but it's designed to, again, empower the patient and provide the patient with sufficient information. So, letting the patient manage who has access themselves. This, of course, works well for adult patients. It's not appropriate for children. So we had another way that we needed to accommodate family member management where we need to document that family member access in the patient's chart. So in MedInformatics, we've got a family member screen. Historically, this was used to capture medical history of family members. It's been around for a long time, but it was also adapted to work for essentially HIPAA release. And I'll show you, it's quite simple. The documented family member who has access will be documented in the patient's chart. First name, last name, date of birth, and their relationship. And then there's a permission button. So 4 fields in order to say that this family member or this person can access this patient's chart. And then we'll walk through how the authorized user at that point can then request that access. So again, we've got patients granting and revoking access themselves. And then we've also got family member management when we're dealing with other family situations. Okay, so we're going to start with the granting access. So on the account screen, the patient is able to invite anyone in their family who they'd like to authorize. So it can be their adult children, it can be, their parents as a 20-year-old, their spouse. What's required? We've got the authorized user's name, date of birth, phone number, because phone number is used for the multi-factor authentication. We're also capturing the email address. We're currently not doing email MFA, but we will in the future. So we wanted to make this work for, future-proof it, right? So we're not using the email address for any matching at all, but this way it's captured. And in the future, the authorized user will have the option to do either email, MFA, or mobile number. And then the relationship, this is the relationship to the patient. This is going to be the same drop down you're going to see in all the other screens, as well as the family member access. So it's the same list of family members for every customer. So you don't have to configure it, and the matching happens. And this just kind of loops so that you can see it multiple times. And then what we'll see once it's done, and at this point, that's all the patient has to do. Now John Smith is the one that will then log in, go through the login process, and then when he logs in, he'll be able to select either himself or Sally, his spouse. And you can see there, sorry, it moves really quickly, that his access is then documented at the bottom of the screen, where the patient, in this case Sally, can also revoke that access. And the next time he logs in, he won't be able to access her record. Okay, so that works great in a lot of situations, but of course it doesn't really work all the time. We have a lot of situations where the patient themselves is never going to log in as themselves. Their record is always going to be managed by somebody else. So how do we do this? This is the family member screen. The default location is in demographics. There's a button. However, it's an action property, and so it can be placed wherever you'd like. You can put it on the tree. You can put it on your clipboard. whatever's useful for your staff to be able to access it. Once you open the screen, you can either click Add to do a new family member or Edit. In this case, I clicked Edit just to show you that there's only a few required screens. So when you first go to the screen, it's going to have, the patient's, the user's name, their address, a lot of other information that we really are not worrying about. The only thing we care about here is the name, date of birth, and the relationship. The relationship is also required just to create a family member in MedInformatics itself. And then the default for that permission to bring, the default's no. So when you add a family member, by default, they don't have access. You're just documenting. You have to actually change the permission from yes to yes in order for this, in this case, the spouse, to request access to, in this case, Paul test accounts record. So there's a lot of fields, but it's really quick and easy. And we see this as long-term, bringing in the ability for the patient to manage this themselves by way of a form. So that would make it a lot easier for the patient to both review who they've authorized and then also update it. Typically, our HIPAA forms are done via a form, but it's just saved as a PDF in the chart. It's relying on staff to go look at it, and the patient really doesn't get a chance to review what they've previously allowed when they come back for future visits. So that's our family member in a nutshell. Let's take a look, though, at what this looks like then from the authorized user's perspective. So again, the same login screen. So they're going to go through this process, and you'll see that as a returning user, what the experience is too. So I'm going to give you both the password and the password list. So I click next. At this point, we're evaluating, has the patient been here before? Do they have a FHIR account? In this case, I do, because you can see I have two. I can either continue by entering my name or click to add my password, which is actually 2 clicks, a little bit quicker. We fill in the username for them. Now, Sally's going to first log in as herself, and then she's going to request access on the account screen. And this allows us to match her record to the patient. Because again, there's minimal information in that screen. We're not inputting, their account or anything else, right? It's harder. We need a little bit of information in order to match to the correct patient. And the phone number in this case is optional. We're anticipating, right, children, the phone number is optional, but they can put it if, so in this case, you can see the family member's found. So that means that in Alex's record, Sally is authorized to view his account, his or her. Now, Sally is advised to log out and back in, so she has to go through the process again. Everyone loves MFA. But this time, I'm going to do the passwordless login, which again is the default, where she'll be entering in her full name and date of birth to continue. And again, we match on the first name to both the first name and the nickname fields. So I always like to plug the importance of that nickname field because it really does facilitate our patient matching. And so here you can see Sally can choose herself. She's always on top, or her child, Alex. So when she picks Alex, now when she logs in, she'll see herself in the banner, but then also the patient's information here so that she knows which record she's in. Because once you're in Patient Connection, it's really unclear. So that banner then updates as needed. So that's really the user requesting access as well as showing the login process and both flavors of it. So again, passwordless is the default. Password is faster, but it does rely on the user remembering or being able to access their passwords. All right. So a lot of demos in this single one. This is going to go through it one more time. So that is really the essential components of Patient Connection 2.0. You'll notice there was for those of you who have been live on it, you'll notice some UI improvements. One of them was that loading screen. So when the time to transition from one screen to another is more than 5 seconds, you're going to see that loading screen. Really, that's going to be that step where we're registering, or really that final login step. We are working to improve that because as much as we like that visual, we don't want the patients to have to see it. But that is new. Also on the login for that SMS code, you may have noticed there's a new countdown timer. So, of course, SMS codes expire. They're not good indefinitely. So now there's a little countdown timer because the same code is good for 60 seconds before the patient should need to request a new one and start over. So a few UI changes, kind of subtle, but I wanted to point out a couple of those. So replacing the patient portal. When we get to the point of officially saying, I'm not using the patient portal anymore, there's no need to create the accounts. So the first one is in demographics. Pretty much everybody has two buttons, one to create a portal account and one to reset that password. Those can go away. You submit a case, those can disappear. Further, most people have some information on that HTML block to identify whether or not if they have a patient portal account or not. A lot of you might have that information documented, even if you don't even use the portal. It's really just been the default content for that HTML block. So now we are recommending that you update that to list the FHIR account information. In the example here, I'm showing the FHIR account, which then lists my phone number that's used as my username. You can see the date that I first registered and then my last login. So as a helpful hint, if to help users help the patients, it's nice to have that reference here. Of course, it's HTML, so you can put it wherever you'd like. If you want to put it on your clipboard, that's a great idea too. Really anywhere that you think staff would need to or should access the patient's login. There are some additional resources to track things like failed logins, but this is the main one that's helpful because it's tied to an actual patient's account in MedInformatics. The second one is getting to know the family member screen. So a lot of customers, I'm going to say the majority, are not currently using this screen at all, and we recognize that. So we knew that this was a new screen, but there are benefits to us mapping to an existing screen because we don't have to create something new. We didn't have to create a new QA or key view that would then be customized and therefore accommodated. At this point, we've got a standard way to manage these family members across all customers, and hopefully it's somewhat painless. It is a new screen. It only takes a few clicks, and it still empowers the staff members to be the ones to verify who should have access. And we're planning to incorporate this into HIPAA forms so that this is done by the patient. But this is certainly an option today to start managing it, not just for patient connection, but potentially for other um, just general, allowing information or allowing really the obtain information is the key here for most of our specialty sites. Um, I had another thought and it just left my head, but this is, again, it's a new screen, but it should be pretty, it shouldn't be too, it's only a few steps, right? It's a few fields, and it will make the experience for your patients who are then really managing the records for their family members easier, right? When they log in, they can just select that family member as needed. Okay, so this is towards the end. We're going to have plenty of time for questions. The key here is we are going to be releasing this to you first in your staging environment if you have a test server, and then into production. It's helpful for end users to know how patients access Patient Connection. The website, you might use MI Notify to send the link out to the patient directly, whether it's for scheduling or to view their test results. It's helpful to know how patients access. In addition, we recommend displaying this FHIR account status. So basically, has the patient logged into Patient Connection or the mobile app? And let's put that information on the clipboard. One thing that was on the slides, but maybe not, I'm going to say it again out loud, is that all of the changes to the login process are compatible between the mobile app and Patient Connection. So when patients register for that account and they have a password, they can use that same password for the mobile app and in Patient Connection and vice versa. So they are designed and expected that the patient can go back and forth and use whichever app they find more convenient in that moment. You might find that patients schedule in Patient Connection, but view their test results in the mobile app. The same login works for both. So there's really no impact. But it's important to understand how you know whether or not a patient has accessed either of the apps. And, again, the last login, I think, is just a convenient addition. Get to know the family member screen. Um, Make sure, find ways to incorporate that into your workflow, make it accessible how you'd like, whether it's in the tree or on the clipboard. And then know that from a marketing perspective, there is a new login assistance resource. So many of you have created really beautiful content on your websites to help patients today. That most of that content's really staying the same, except perhaps the login process itself, as far as the screenshots. But really, the overall effect of it is the same. But we hope that any new content that you create, we can then link it to the login screens for the user to access at any point. So this is rolling out pretty soon, over the month of November. So understand the login process as far as your testing plan. Familiarize yourself with how patients grant and request access. Most of you are really good about testing, those of you who are either in the process of going live or already live. But take a look at that account screen. You probably haven't looked at it since you were first testing. It now has a lot more activity. And you'll be able to see that activity in the app itself when you log in as your user. So see how that looks so that you can understand it and be able to explain it to patients when needed. And then last but not least, for those of you interested in the additional features for two-way messaging or the patient summary, which is also called the CCDA, or you have the PHR module, if all of those are familiar, then feel free to let us know. In a lot of cases, we can also enable those features in the staging environment first, so you can do some testing before we roll it out to production. So we can separate those two. Several of you we have kind of queued up in that manner so that you can test messaging and then decide when you want to turn that on in production once the 2.0 version is released.